Hi, everyone. Welcome to another edition of All Access with me. And I forget the date now. It's August 5th, 2022. We should probably establish some kind of a bear market marker and talk about before bear market, after bear market, that kind of a thing. But we're a couple of months into a sideways market. It's a great time to take stock and look around and see what's going on. And that's what I'm going to do today and share with you what all has been on my mind. Let's see, it's been a very eventful week. It's been a really fun week with a lot of things happening and a lot to discuss. So let's get started, and let's get started on a very happy up note. And that has to do with the things that are one of the many things that's happening on Avalanche. And this is the BTC.b update. Remember that we built a new bridge, we launched a new bridge between Bitcoin and Avalanche. And this bridge allows you to take your Bitcoins out of Bitcoin, that network, same Bitcoin though, and move them onto Avalanche, where you can send them around super fast and have them participate in DeFi. So this is really exciting. I just looked at the size of the amount of BTC in that network in Avalanche, and it is currently $52.6 million. So the Lightning Network, which has been out for 3-4 years, I think, has about $78 million in it. And you can't send all 78 million, over Lightning because it's a complicated graph. The graph has capacity limits based on which edge you're sending the money over. And so it's a complicated thing. I'm really thrilled. Avalanche is flat. Anyone, any address can send the full amount to any other address on the network. It's instantaneous, and it doesn't have non-atomic failure modes. It just works the way you think money sending should work. And it's pretty fantastic, I think, in terms of sending valuable assets around the world, which is what it was designed for. And the latest thing that happened was more MoneyFi. So this is a project, a lending platform that added support for BTC.b. So you can use your Bitcoin as collateral on more money. And I don't know how exactly it works, but I think when you deposit bridged Bitcoin, you borrow the money token, and the money token you can then use as money elsewhere. So you can borrow against your Bitcoin if you need cash but don't want to change your position. You don't want to sell your precious Bitcoin. Well, then you can borrow against it, and as long as Bitcoin doesn't crash to a level where you would be liquidated, then you get to keep your Bitcoin and use that cash that you borrow against it. So they wrote a very nice little project. I have no affiliation with this project. I haven't done any analysis into how their smart contract works, by the way, but it's a DeFi platform that allows lending. And so they wrote a nice write-up where they describe how this thing works. So they point out that BTC is indeed the most liquid asset in crypto. It absolutely is. Bitcoin has a couple of things going for it. One, of course, is the brand recognition. We all worked for many, many, many years to get brand recognition for Bitcoin. I know the number of politicos I spoke to and briefed on Bitcoin. I know the number of researchers that I tried to pull into crypto in general and Bitcoin specifically. And this thing is known. You go to any random country and you ask the cab driver, has he heard of or has she heard of Bitcoin? They will say yes, probably. So it's famous. And the second thing it's got going for it is that it's liquid. You can buy and sell large quantities of Bitcoin anywhere around the world. So it has about 440 billion in liquidity. It's by far the most liquid asset out there. So now the problem is it can't be used in DeFi. And so the more money folks are pointing out that there are now use cases in DeFi, and BTC.b furthers that trend. What they really mean is it enables a whole slew of smart contract-based operations on Bitcoin. And BTC.b is created in a way where you don't have to go through a custodian. You don't have to go and interact with a human. You don't have to go through any of the annoying processes typically required for dealing with any kind of an asset that is backed by someone. This is your keys on Bitcoin controlling the BTC.b asset on the Avalanche network. So the BTC gets locked in the bridge when you transfer it over, and the same keys, you can't transfer them to the coins to someone else. The same keys allow you to mobilize a corresponding wrapped asset on the Avalanche side, and then you can have them partake in DeFi. You can do it. You can just treat them like Bitcoin, and at any time you like, you can convert them back into Bitcoin in about 1 second on the Avalanche side, and there's corresponding 3 or 6 um, confirmations that you will want to wait for on the Bitcoin side. So it's pretty cool. It's very fast. It's very convenient. The security of Bitcoin is is of course very important. Both BTC.b and WBTC trade on Avalanche. WBTC has to be bridged from Ethereum. So you go from BTC to Ethereum to WBTC, and then from Ethereum to Avalanche to get WBTC.e. It's a complicated process. It adds bridging risk, it adds custodial risk, it adds annoyance in general. So why would you do any of this? Just take our Bitcoin, move it in. And then they point out that we use this bridge technology, which I have so much to say about, and I want to come back to that. That we use the world's best bridge technology. As a result, we are the #1 bridge with the most market share. There is none other that has more market share than we do. It's a really nice piece of kit with cutting edge technology that I am personally super proud of. And decentralization. So Bitcoin is decentralized, and WBTC is minted and managed via organizations and intermediaries such as BitGo and CoinList, and there's custodial risk there. So this is completely decentralized. You take our Bitcoin, we do a crypto trick that allows you to use the same keys on both sides, and therefore it's just your keys, same keys, moving the same assets. The costs. That's kind of cool. Bridging BTC to Avalanche is fast, and minting WBTC costs 0.25%. So when they say is fast and inexpensive, they really mean it's really dirt cheap. You pay one transaction fee on the Bitcoin side, and another transaction fee, which is like a fraction of a penny on the Avalanche side. So whatever the current transaction fees are on BTC, that's how much it costs to move any amount of BTC. So it's super cheap, not a percentage of the price. It's just super cheap. And then once it's on Avalanche, every transaction costs a fraction of a penny at the moment. It's pretty nice that way. So better tech is just better tech. It's just pretty amazing. And then there are, of course, returns to be had. So these folks are offering 4.19% APY. Why they couldn't give a little bit more to reach the magic number that the internet loves so much for that 20%, I don't know. So WBTC, you earn a very tiny amount of 0.02% APY. I think the world is not hungry for WBTC, so that's just kind of a saturated market. But BTC.b is a cool thing. It's an interesting thing, and so these folks are offering 4.19% on it. So it's cool. Take a look. It's worth a look. It's you should just check it out. It's if you are used to, and I've spoken to some of our users who've tried this. It's really interesting. I had forgotten the sort of the mindset of Bitcoin users. So in general, I remember how I was too. I was very tolerant of delays in the network, and so when they bridge over, the bridging takes a little bit of time on the Bitcoin side, and they very patiently wait. And so it's really interesting. I can't wait anymore. I've lost that ability, that patience, because I got used to Avalanche. And then they see that the confirmations are coming in. That's something that they are, of course, accustomed to. They understand that, just like we all did. But then once it moves on to the Avalanche side, it's lightning fast. And no pun intended, it's super fast, and they're not used to that. It's really cool. They just press a button and it moves. And so when they see this, it's just kind of mind-boggling in the best way possible. And when I taught, I taught, I don't know, many thousands of people. And one of the things that I loved about teaching was that eureka moment. You would have like the sea of faces looking at you, and you would describe something to them that they didn't quite understand, that they didn't quite have a mental model for, or that they didn't think was possible. I taught operating systems, and it maybe doesn't sound like the most exciting of subjects, but it is actually a very deep and very exciting subject. And you tell people about something like, let's say, time multiplexing. How a single processor that executes only a single program at a time can make it appear as if there are multiple programs executing concurrently. And the core idea is simple. The processor just executes, just a bunch of instructions from one program that saves the state and jumps to the state of another program, executes a little bit there, and does it really fast. And kind of like a movie, these things are happening so fast. It's as if these windows, it's as if these applications side by side are executing in tandem concurrently, even though you've got only one processor that executes one instruction at a time. You tell people this, and they have this gotcha moment. Their eyes just kind of open up, like, oh yeah, I wondered how that worked, and I didn't think. Now I never understood how that was possible, or they taught us about hardware, but I never got how this thing that happens every day on my laptop actually worked. And it's the same kind of thing with Avalanche. You go to your typical old-time user, some OG who's accustomed to the granddaddy of all technologies, and you say, here is something cool. And it's just mind boggling. And they're skeptical. They're going to be skeptical. They're going to be like, oh, how can you make this so fast? It's got to be centralized. And then you tell them, well, look, compared to the mining network for Bitcoin, this thing is far more decentralized. And then they don't believe you for a while, but everybody has their own rate at which they become comfortable with the latest generation of technology, and it's just really wonderful to see. I was just blown away from their reactions, and I got a glimpse of what was happening when I was in the classroom, where I saw students with that eureka moment. It's like, hey, yeah, this is exactly like I would want it to work. They just didn't think it was possible, and now it's just happening in front of their faces. It's just really cool. So. There are a lot of false narratives out there, as usual. One of the reasons why I do this podcast. And so, Bitcoiners will always be more comfortable with proof of work. They will always say all sorts of things about, other systems. And you tell them, look, Avalanche could actually work with proof of work as well. And then they get really confused. So what's the takeaway from all this? I think the takeaway is, here is your alpha, right? The alpha is there's going to be some people who just don't yet get it, and there's a lot of them. And here we are with far better tech, and it takes a while. I remember the first couple years of Bitcoin. I remember the reticence. I remember the skepticism. And there's quite a few normies who are still skeptical or still fighting against crypto. That's fine too. And it'll take a while, right? But take anybody. I just spent the afternoon talking to a very, very nice person who spent many years in the payments industry. And she was saying, look, it's so clear. Like, ask anyone in Singapore, ask anyone in New York, and they will tell you that the current systems are archaic and we need crypto. And so we were discussing why it is that there are some enclaves of people that are still stuck in the old ways. So Avalanche is a similar thing. It's way ahead of the competition, and or not. Let's not call it the competition. It's way ahead of other systems. There are many systems out there that are working really hard to get to where Avalanche was a few years ago. Right, the merge, the verge, the surge, the whatever else, all of those things. Combine them all. And where do you end up? Well, you end up with a narrative that's going to stretch out over a decade that will bring you to where we are with Avalanche maybe 2 years ago. So the merge won't even get you. There's going to have to be a hard fork after the merge to unleash the tokens. So there's quite a lot of ways to go on all these other systems, and we are far ahead because we have better tech, and our timing was actually not bad either. So we're ahead of the curve, and thank you for bearing with me, and thank you for being part of the journey. And there's just cool stuff happening. So take a look at the BTC.b stuff. If you want to play with a lending platform, there's this one. And I can't wait for the other lending platforms on top of Avalanche to start supporting the BTC.b asset, and so like Aave and so forth. When they support it, it's going to be great. So I know Aave, it's well-tested, time-tested project. So, DeFi is really cool. Come take a look. I know, it's a bear market, but there's a lot of yield to be had. A lot of fortunes are made in bear or sideways markets. So it's a good time to actually get familiar with the technology. I personally find it fun because the pressure is off and craziness is not as high. In a bull market, there are a lot of people who are coming up with BS and offering it to the masses, and there's a lot of noise pollution. In a bear market, that's when you see who the real builders are. So it's really nice to be here in a quiet time, building and offering new products. So there's this. There are many others. I promised this last time I spoke to you, and there are many other new products coming out of Avalanche soon, and I cannot wait. Absolutely cannot wait to show the world much better tech for doing the things that it does currently with a lot of trust, a lot of duct tape, spit, and whatever else that it takes to keep the traditional finance system together. So I'm really excited about this, and just can't wait to see greater adoption of the bridge, greater adoption of Bitcoin on Avalanche, and so on. All right, let's shift gears. Let's talk about the exciting events of this week. There were quite a few, and I want to talk to you about three of them that have nothing to do with Avalanche, but nevertheless are very important, and they point out some of the hypotheses or some of the core visions, some of the core vision behind Avalanche, so the core technical vision behind everything that we've been building. So these things all intersect, and it's kind of interesting to go and look at what's happening. So let's see. So this thing happened. This took a lot of effort from many of us. There was an enormous episode where Solana's wallets got affected, and about 8,000 addresses ended up being emptied out. So someone out there, it looked like, acquired the keys, the private keys, to 8,000 wallets. I mean, what 8,000 addresses is more technically correct. Some of these addresses might belong to the same wallet, same person, but it's probably not. It's at least it's definitely in the thousands of people were affected, and for the longest time we had no idea. And I don't know why I feel this way, but it's probably because Solana and Avalanche were contemporaries. We kind of launched at around the same time. They launched before we did. I know Anatoly, and somehow every time something bad happens to Solana, I kind of get like sort of empathy heartburn. I feel bad. I don't know why I shouldn't, but I do. And we definitely don't want the space to get spooked. I don't want anybody getting hacked. It's not good. And I don't want my competitors going down in any shape or form. It's not good for any of us. And because of portfolio theory, these coins are kind of intermingled anyway. So, if one goes down, they all go down. So there's that. If a lot of people lose money to a hacker, then people leave the space, don't come back. That's not good. So I've generally been very, very emphatic when it comes to hacks of other people's systems, and so this one kind of got me. It was a late night where I am. I don't know. Maybe you can guess where I am, just based on. I'm not sure if you're hearing the cicadas in the background chirping away, but so I was sitting here and about to go to sleep, and when word of this hack, started trickling out. Lots and lots of people affected, and we did not know what was happening. And it turned out that the wallet had some integrations that ended up leaking people's private keys to centralized entities, and those web access logs then ended up having incredibly valuable information, people's mnemonics that the hacker could then take and empty out the wallets with. So what was going on? We ended up spending some time looking into it, and it was really interesting. So when we did not know what was happening, there were all sorts of ideas floating around. People were saying things like, maybe it's a browser hack. Now, as soon as I hear this, of course, all the alarm bells go off. All of my team gets deployed as well, and we have essentially a crisis center thinking about is, are Avalanche users affected? What's going on? Because if a browser hack is in effect, well, Solana is getting emptied out today, but then, within like half an hour, Avalanche could be affected, or within a day, Avalanche could be affected. So we had to look into it. And it didn't look like a browser hack. A browser hack would affect only one browser. It looked like more than one browser was affected. And there were other hypotheses as well. In the end, it turned out to be what I said. And these kinds of wallet attacks where the keys are compromised are absolutely horrible. And so Arthur ended up pointing out some interesting things. He's saying, look, there are a bunch of things that can fall upon you. So you're sitting there, and your L1 starts to block and exert censorship over some users. That's a problem. It can happen under certain circumstances for each and every protocol. And a protocol is strong to the extent that it can fight this. So, for example, 51% of miners can block and censor transactions in Bitcoin. This is well known and well understood. So you don't want any miner to get too big, etc. You can have a consensus safety failure where two portions of your network don't agree on the same ledger. That's a big problem. You can have a deflation bug. That is, you start burning coins and you lose coins, and that's not good. You can have an inflation bug where you print coins. So there were bugs that could have caused inflation in a variety of systems. All of the anonymous coins, I believe, ended up having one form or another of these. I know for sure that Zcash had this, and I believe Monero had it as well. Don't come after me if I'm slightly wrong about Monero. Maybe Monero did not have it, but Zcash certainly did. It can happen. There are no known instances of it being exploited in Zcash. But then again, there's no proof that it wasn't exploited because it's all anonymous, it's all private, it's unknown. Those are bad. Like that will cause the value of the coin to drop. And so you don't want these. But the last one, that's, I think, the most concerning one. It's a widespread private key compromise. So if that were to happen, then there's no remedy. So your users all have a bunch of keys. That's how they identify themselves to you. And someone has access to the keys of those users. And that's really problematic. That's really, really problematic because now you don't know who the authentic user is and who the hacker is. And so it's very hard to recover from this. And so it's a real problem. And Godspeed to the recovery effort on Solana. I'm not sure how that's going to be managed yet. I haven't followed on with their recovery. I was very, very interested in the root cause because these things affect us, and also because of a personal interest in making sure that not that many people were hurt. And I'm glad that it got resolved with only 8 million in losses. That's, in the grand scheme of things, that's not that bad. And we've seen far worse things. So Solana folks, my heart goes out to you, and I hope you weren't affected. And if you were affected, I hope there's a way to compensate and so on. And so it's just, and I'm glad that it wasn't as wide an attack as I feared, as many of us feared, because when it started happening, no one knew when it would stop. There was no end in sight, and so that was really problematic. So that's that. Let's see. The next topic has to do with Solana as well. And this I saw. I was very pro Solana a second ago, but this next thing, this kind of shook me as well. This I saw yesterday, and it's a report from CoinDesk on the DeFi ecosystem on top of Solana again. And I want to talk to you about it. It's a serious matter. It's an important matter, and it's absolutely important for us to police ourselves. So the article, if you haven't read it, it's called Master of Anons, How a Crypto Developer Faked a DeFi Ecosystem. It turns out that these two brothers, Ian and his brother, I forget the name of the brother, Macalinao, they used a web of bogus identities to create the illusion of a developer community. And as CoinDesk calls it, juicing value on the Saber protocol and Solana blockchain. So what did this fellow do? He pretended to be 11 different people, I believe, 10 or 11 different people, operating independently, and built multiple DeFi blocks in such a way as to inflate the amount of total value locked on Solana. At its peak, I believe about Solana ended up holding about $10.5 billion in total value locked, in total value in its DeFi ecosystem. This was perplexing to me. So Solana has a bunch of things about it that limit how good it is for handling DeFi. One of the things Solana did in order to process, in order to boost their TPS numbers, they tried to make all of their transactions fit in a single packet. A single packet holds 1,500 bytes or so, 1,520. So 1,500 bytes will end up holding, about 5 or 6 hashes. Right? These hashes are fairly big. You add some code around it, you add some envelope, etc., etc. You end up being stuck in a situation where you can identify, and you can interact with only about 5 or 6 contracts. And all of you who are real DeFi degens know that a lot of these DeFi operations, if you're doing them well, you end up issuing transactions that are fairly complicated, and they touch more than a handful of smart contracts. So there you are. You typically have to do something like borrow and then swap for one coin, swap one for another, do something else, and then return. Sorry, flash loan out, then do some kind of borrowing or something like that. Then go and swap, then go and do another swap, maybe do some arbitrage on something else, and then return it all back to the original flash loan contract. That's a bunch of interactions right there. It won't fit in a single block. That was one of the reasons why, from a technical perspective, it's a little perplexing that there could be so much TVL on Solana. Well, it turns out that this fellow faked it all, and he built these DeFi components in such a way that they ended up double counting and triple counting and whatever else, quadruple counting the value in these stacked protocols, so that it appears as if there are all these independent protocols developed by separate teams. They all work together somehow, and you put $1 in, but when you look at the TVL, you've got $10 of value. So when this was happening, I know how hard I was working. I was working pretty damn hard, and I know how hard my team was working, and they're working far harder than I do. I mean, I know I do work hard, always have, but my team is another level and insane. And we ended up having about $17 billion in TVL. So Solana had 10.5, and it turns out 7.5 of that 10.5 came from this guy. That's really, really wrong. This is ethically and probably legally just absolutely wrong. This is fraud of another scale, of another level. So, if this is the way we're going to be in this space, then it's deeply wrong. I mean, it's just, I don't know what else to say other than this really got me. I read this last night. I'm still not over it. Everybody who reads it comes away saying, incredible, insane. How did this happen? And then a lot of other people say, well, all the signs were there. I will say this. I have said this before, that the ethos of a project is probably, and in my experience, always formed in its early days. Microsoft embodies Bill Gates. You name it. Google embodies Sergey and Larry. You just name it all, and it's just, you can see the founders, all of their biases and all of their values reflected in the companies and communities they build. And so Solana, with its juicing of its TPS numbers, started this. They juice those numbers. They define TPS in a way that goes counter to every technical metric, and they did it I believe, in a way that was deceiving. I don't know if they intended that. I can't speak to intent, but it was certainly something that led to deception. People got confused. And once you start at the lowest level with a sea of lies, then it's not a surprise that people come in on top and they start doing this kind of thing. And you've got another sea of lies on top. And now this news article says they're moving to Aptos. Aptos is this thing from former Facebook people, and they are using a protocol called Hot Stuff. Hot Stuff was authored by one of the Avalanche co-founders, Ted Yin, my student. It's Dr. Ted Yin. So it's Ted's work along with a lot of other people that led to that chain. Their claim to fame is parallel execution. That's something that's super easy to add. It's a small optimization. They use the move virtual machine. Okay, whatever they add. Like, this is kind of like you invent a hat, you put a feather on it, and you say, ooh, look at my hat. It's so cool. It's so novel. And you say, what's novel about it? It's just like any other hat. So, no, it's got the green feather. Well, good for them. So they've got some accoutrements on top of this chain that they built that no one cares about, and they've got this guy to juice their numbers. So now you know, and it was just flabbergasting. It's just insane, you know. And he says, this is his own blog post. I devised a scheme to maximize Solana's TVL. I would build protocols that stack on top of each other such that the dollar could be counted several times. So this is what you're going into. You know, you could make money this way. There are many other ways to make money. You know, I could probably steal my neighbor's, she has a nice chair over there. I could steal her chair, you know, and it'd be mine. I don't, you know, it's like it'd be mine, right? And I'm not going to do that. It's just like that's not what we do. There's a limit, and I don't know how to express this. There's a red line somewhere, and you just got to say, as an adult, as a man, as a woman, whatever, as a person, having come of age, you say, all right, I know who I am. I know what my values are, and this is where I draw the line. This is where I say no. This is not. You can win, but not at this cost. I will not compromise my core principles to win. So this is incredibly wrong. If you're in the Solana community, I bled with you just 2 nights ago. 3 nights ago, 2 nights ago. I'm still sleepless from it, by the way. So, you know, I felt bad for all of you. I worked hard to find, with my team, we came up with various hypotheses on how the private keys might have leaked. There are tricks or problems. Oh, I want to come back to that, actually. There are problems that might leak private keys, and we came up with one of them, and it was a direction that nobody else was exploring. Anatoly and I had a back and forth saying, hey, you know, you should look at this, and they explored it. It ended up not being the root cause. It was much more prosaic, much more straightforward what happened in there in that particular wallet. But you know, I was there with you. So now please be there for the space. I expect this of you. You need to stand against this kind of lying with benchmarks, lying with numbers. You don't need it. If Solana is any good, you don't need to resort to this. And if it's not good, then you got to just know early. Why fool yourselves? Why fool everybody else? This is the time to take a stand and say, look, this is my red line. This is what I believe in. And you don't want to be part of a thing like this. At least I don't. And so anyhow, this is the Solana thing. Let me tell you about the wallet security incident. By the way, that was kind of interesting. So for a long time, no one had any idea where the private keys were leaked, and so one of the ideas that we suggested was perhaps there was some kind of a flaw in a signature in one of the digital signature libraries that were used in Solana that would reveal the private keys. Now, how does this happen, you might ask? So in ECDSA, for example, just to give you an example, there are two parameters. It's called a P and a Q, and so the P and Qs are numbers that you use in the digital signing process, and the Q number, especially, it's called a nonce. It should be a number that you pick at random, and it should be a number that you never ever reuse again. And it's not widely known. And I knew about this problem because I sat through a very, very entertaining talk. It was given by a postdoc, and a brilliant postdoc from UPenn. And he was working with Nadia Henninger, who's a brilliant, she's slightly younger than me. I think she's next generation, like 10 years younger than me. brilliant cryptographer of her generation, along with her fiance at UPenn. And the two of them, so they're both brilliant cryptographers plus the postdocs. So that's these three people. There might have been more people on that paper. So he describes, well, look, there's this PMQ issue. If you ever reuse a Q number, or if you pick a non-random value, like if you always pick the number 1, or if you always pick the number 0, God forbid, or if you always pick whatever number, you're going to end up revealing your private key by virtue of having issued multiple signatures. So he gets up there. So what he does is he in the early days, this was a problem with some Bitcoin clients and Bitcoin wallets. So he did a huge scan of the Bitcoin blockchain, and he tried to identify all cases. And it was really funny. I remember his face. He describes this whole process. He describes the vulnerability. Describes the math behind it, of course. It says, look, I did the scan. And then I scanned the whole blockchain, Bitcoin blockchain, and I found 378. I'm making the number up. It's in the 300s, 318, 378, something like that. So he found these, let's say 378 cases of this exact issue affecting wallets. And so there are 378 potentially juicy addresses from which he could steal all of the Bitcoin. So he gets really excited. And I'll give you a moment to think about your answer to the following question. How much money do you think was at stake? Or how much money could this brilliant postdoc, working with the two brilliant cryptographers of their generation, have made from sweeping the Bitcoin blockchain with this trick? I'll give you a second. And come up with some number. I don't know, how much money would there be in 378 Bitcoin wallets or something like that. I had my guess. I was like, oh, he probably swept $10 million, at least $1 million. It's still a good landfall for a postdoc. It's like, not that you could take it home. The university would never allow that. But it's like he gets excited, right? It's like it's potentially very interesting. He could save the money and give it back to people, whatever. It turns out that he could sweep about $0 worth of Bitcoin. So, and the reason for that is that there was another person that we don't know about. We don't know who that is. And that person was just as brilliant as this postdoc plus the other two. And that other person had already swept all of these addresses. He had not worried about writing a paper. He was not at a conference describing this problem. He had already taken his winnings and gone home, I guess. So all of this to say is, this is a very adversarial environment. There are some really brilliant people constantly hammering away at systems, and you have to be super diligent, and you have to understand all of the details of all of the technology underneath. And I am forever humbled by the complexity of the things that we are dealing with. We're forever diligent. I'm super happy that none of these things have happened to us. In any case, so that's my story. I forgot about that when I was talking about the previous issue, which was the Solana wallet hack. And when it comes to Solana TVL, I kind of think that it's incumbent on all of us to take a stand and say, look, this is not something you can do. It's just not. This is not a good way to build a system. This is not a good way to build an ecosystem. And just work at it like the way everybody else does. Okay, I know it's hard because I do it that way, and you're gonna have to do it that way, because otherwise you'll be exposed, and it doesn't look good. It really doesn't look good. Much as my heart goes out to you when you have a wallet issue as a fellow techie, as a person, as someone who is trying to be a role model to very young people, like little kids and so on. It's very, very important that we not get into fraud territory in any shape or form in financial systems. And Solana's this fellow is just, I think, deep into that territory. All right, let's shift gears into yet another contentious topic, the bridge security. So the Nomad bridge in Ethereum from the folks, from the Nomad folks, was compromised. This was a bridge, and this was a set of people that gave us a lot of grief about Avalanche. They badmouthed our bridge and said all kinds of things about bridge security. And one of the central claims they made is because Nomad is based on the same technology, same mechanism as optimistic rollups, it is far more secure than other bridge technologies. Well, Nomad got raided, absolutely raided. The bridge has $0. I think 56 million was lost, and I think 3,000 people or so raided the bridge, if I'm not mistaken. Like anybody could craft a transaction, and lots of people crafted a transaction to steal some of the money inside the bridge. The money is gone, and I think the bridge is now empty. So now that can happen. I mean, this is terrible. And if it had just happened, I'd be like, okay, whatever. But then people started using this Nomad failer. Ethereum maxis started using the Nomad failer to trot out that silly post from Vitalik about how bridges are unsafe, and started trying to talk about bridges and saying that all bridge technologies are unsafe. That's ridiculous. You can't do this. This is, you either live by the sword of L2s and rollups and you die by them, or I don't know what. You have to. That's like the only option you've got. You can't use your own failure just because there's a common word in there and try to make it somebody else's failure. This was whatever happened to Nomad would also or could also happen to a rollup. It's the same core tech. I got a lot of crap from the various different people back in the day saying, hey, this thing is built to be so safe, blah, blah, blah. Rollups are amazing, da, da, da. And so now people are saying, oh, look, Nomad failed. So therefore, all bridges are unsafe. This is ridiculous. So this is your constant reminder that not all bridges are created equally. At a very high level, there are bridges built by people who, are essentially figuring things out on crypto Twitter, and then there are bridges built by people with a background in computer security. So the core thing that happened with Nomad is that the complexity of the rollup got in the way. Now, I got a lot of pushback from ETH maxis, and they all go like blah blah blah. I got called a clown. I'm totally fine with that. You can call me anything you like. At the end of the day, I'm right, and the ETH maxis are dead wrong. And when they are dead wrong and they're afraid, that's when the personal attacks come out. When the invective goes through the roof, is especially when they are weak. If they had a technical point, they would have made the technical point against what I said, but they don't have one. So therefore, it has to be made personal. The Nomad bridge is an example of why bridges should not rely on complex smart contracts. The counter argument to this is not, oh, look, this bug was just somewhere in the contract. It could have been any bug in any contract. And, if this contract had been written properly, it would be amazing. Well, yes, no shit, Sherlock. If my uncle had whatever, like, the saying, it'd be a different world, but we're not in that world. Okay? So this is incredibly straightforward. The point we're trying to make is this roll-up technology, I love it, by the way. I have nothing against it, but it's complex. It's so complex that empirically speaking, not one of you has been able to build one that actually works. Where are the trustless, optimistic roll-ups? And I'll wait here. But, optimism is not trustless right now. You got to trust it. It's been how long? Why is this so hard to write? And if this was feasible, we'd be there. So one of the fundamental differences between us and my view of the world and what's happening in Ethereum is that we believe in building practical things that work. And Ethereum is getting caught up in all sorts of, secondary issues and a variety of, incorrect assumptions about how to build systems, that they end up finding themselves in a portion of the solution space that's very complicated, that they don't know how to get out of, for which there is no feasibility proof that they can actually get out of. I'll give you some examples. For the longest time, Ethereum was going to scale with VDFs. The Ethereum Foundation was going to hold a competition between people who build verifiable delay functions. For another while, they were going to build VRFs, verifiable random functions. For some time, they looked into accumulators, and it's now widely accepted that accumulators are not feasible. So There are a lot of dead ends that they went into, where the dead end ended up with, oh, this is so complex, and there's some hidden gotcha in here when you get down into the nitty gritty. Roll-ups, I believe, are actually, they might be feasible, maybe. And ZK roll-ups may be feasible. But even something like optimistic roll-ups that should be straightforward to implement turns out to be not at all straightforward. And something like this, it's not supposed to be complicated, and yet it was. So don't come back at me and say, oh, if it had been done correctly, blah, blah, blah. That's stupid. Because I'm not saying, essentially what you're saying is, if there wasn't a problem, there would not be a problem. Okay? Well, I'm saying there is a problem here because these things are complex to build. And that's just something that's empirically true. Yes, you can get upset at me for saying this, but if you're going to be upset at your best allies and friends who really want you to succeed, I really do. And when roll-ups succeed, I'll be one of the first people to support them. The day after they actually work, we will have them deployed on Avalanche. And there's no reason not to. They're perfectly fine technologies, etc. But as I see it, the development path on this particular roadmap is fraught with infeasible solutions, with solutions whose feasibility is, I don't want to say infeasible, whose feasibility has not yet been proven, that lead to complex solutions full of bugs. And there's a secondary problem, I've talked about this before, they create fragmented worlds with non-uniform APIs, non-uniform interfaces, non-uniform experiences for the users, such that your system fractures and it disappears underneath multiple layers that become harder and harder to interact with each other. And if left alone on a roadmap like that, I would not want to use the resulting system. There will be a gazillion different L2s. Each and every one of them will issue their own coin. When I said this a year and a half ago, everybody attacked me then as well. They said all sorts of things about me, and that's totally fine. And look what's happening today. Everybody is issuing their own coin. I said all of these L2s will issue their own coin, and they will compete with the underlying system. They will try to suck users in and never let them go. They will end up having huge, long delays in how long it takes for users to take their money out. And I said, and I'll say this again, congrats, guys. You are trying to implement the current system that we have, except with more complexity and with more steps. So I stand by that. Everything that happened on the Nomad bridge reaffirms exactly what we've been saying all along. Yes, in theory, if it's perfectly done, roll-ups are great. Now show me an example. Why is it taking so long? I mean, we built Avalanche from scratch in the time that you guys spent to not do anything on this front. And I'm kind of tired of kind of trying to fight your fantasy with my reality. Yeah, in your fantasy, you're doing all sorts of things. You're a superhero. You're in a phone booth, changing your clothing. You're having, whatever it is, having the best time with supermodels of whatever. And, you're an intergalactic traveler. Sure. And and I've got something that works. And it cannot compete with your fantasy. But I hate to break it to you. You're living in fantasy land. Let's see the stuff in action. Where is it? Pony up the tech. Okay? Get the merge done. Let's get it done. Do all the other things. Catch up to where we are. And then we'll talk. Okay? And until then, we all need to be a little bit humble. So everything I said about Nomad, I stand behind. This is, it's definitely indicative of the greater failure here, which is thinking that just because in some theoretical universe, one option is good, then it means that in every universe, every path to that particular final state is also good. That's false. It's Nomad bridge is going to have whatever. An optimistic roll-up bridge is always going to be more complex than, for example, the Avalanche bridge. Very different technology. And that on-chain complexity then leads to these kinds of issues. So, and there are lots of other people saying the same thing, and we're going to just butt heads on this. And, I don't know what to say about, due to the Ethereum maxis. They will, of course, say all sorts of things, and the attacks are personal. I'm kind of sad about the personal nature of these attacks, but what can you do? There is a very concrete technical issue here. It's very simple to measure, and, the empirical situation is what it is. So you can't deny it. Remember how the Bitcoiners were denying your reality. They were saying no one needs smart contracts. Remember those days? I was there. Many of you weren't there. So a lot of those Ethereum maxis are just newcomers, and so it's really frustrating to deal with them, to deal with people who refuse to believe in objective reality, who turn off their senses. Clearly, you are seeing no roll-ups that are trustless right now, no sequencers that are actually fault tolerant. What kind of a system do you want to build? And because these core technologies are prone to failure, then you have to build everything with extra layers of complexity because failures are coming. And that's really part of the reason why ETH2 is so slow to make progress. You've got like lots and lots of layers of stuff that are all fragile, and that causes more layers to be added. And now you've got everything in the kitchen sink, and it's got RCAs and VDFs and VRFs in some discarded corner. You've got all these other shiny tools that are being constantly thrown in because nothing is good enough. And there is no feasibility study that this will actually yield something good in the end. So that's where I stand with my vision on how we're going. And in contrast, Avalanche offers a uniform way to scale. It offers a uniform API across the subnets that it supports, and it supports rollups. When the day comes that that the L2 crowd figures out how to make them work, they'll just work on top of Avalanche. So that's where we are. I'm running a little late. Let me just go through. The other issue, of course, is where I'm sitting right now is in the path of a bunch of ants. So it's kind of interesting. I'm seeing a bunch of bugs crawl on my screen. This is absolute, just like three ants on my screen. Absolute nightmare for a programmer to see so many bugs. Okay, so back to happy positive world. So we dealt with Solana. We dealt with Solana's goosing of the numbers. We saw the Nomad stuff. That's really, it all took a bunch of effort and time. The BTC stuff is going on. In addition, we just launched an Explorer. We got a lot of feature upgrades. The Explorer now supports subnets much better, and it takes no time at all to launch a subnet. I think it's like 8 hours from nothing to fully deployed subnet validator sets for the initial validators, Explorers, etc. And the Explorers are beautiful. So take a look. There's a new homepage, new navigation. There's more info on validators. We want to provide as much info about subnets as we can. We want to make the experience with them as seamless as possible. So let's see. This is a glimpse of the Avalanche Explorer. It's kind of cool, and you can take a look. And and here we see the trusty C chain, X chain, P chain. There will be many others, of course, over time. And I should mention this: if Move gets traction, we will support an M chain. Not a problem for us. I've been thinking about the WASM chain. So if you want to use a truly decentralized, truly fast, reliable system, we could support WASM. And it's something on the back of my mind. And if there are WASM programmers, Rust programmers out there who want to use Avalanche, get in touch with me, DM me. And I'm curious about new projects that we might be able to onboard. I haven't seen anything compelling yet. And had I done that, we would have supported the double chain because we already have a prototype. So anyway, so those are things. The Explorer is up. It's cool. Take a look. Shapeshift. Good old friend Eric Voorhees. He changed what he does. He's just, I think, peripherally involved in the operation of Shapeshift. It's now a DAO, DAO coordinated exchange. But he did a big change with it. He essentially stepped down from running an exchange and turned it into a wholesale DAO. And that DAO now currently supports AVAX, and you can now buy, sell, send, receive, trade AVAX and AVAX tokens, and with a great wallet and a beautiful user experience. So more protocols, more chains, power to them. Can't wait to see more of it. It's great to see support. I remember one of the early days, when I was thinking about launching Avalanche, talking to Eric Voorhees, and sort of getting advice from him on how to interact with exchanges. So it's been great. It's wonderful to see this. I think this was one of the last holdouts because of DAO. It takes a little bit of time to decide and move forward. I think we have representation in a gazillion markets by now, and that's really good to see. So, but there are still areas of the world where we could use better. Actually, we could, even in the U.S. We could use better understanding of what Avalanche brings to the table. So in a bull market, everybody looks flat. Everybody looks the same. They all make the same noise. And, might as well, whatever, just put your money into X, Y, or Z. There's the unit fallacy. People who look at the unit of X and they see that it's $0.000001, they think it's cheap. They go into it. It's all sorts of funny games are at work in a bull market. But in a bear market, this is the time to learn about systems and how they actually differ. And any techie who has done that for Avalanche will come to realize that this is fundamentally different. At every level and everything we touch, there is something scientifically different that gives us an edge.